So as I previously mentioned, the NBA trade deadline happened, or at least it ended at 3 p.m. Eastern Time today as of time of recording. So it has been a wild one. It's one of the craziest NBA trade deadlines I've seen in quite some time. And, you know, last year was crazy as well. This year I think may have topped it. So I've certainly gotten very lucky being able to cover on this podcast two fantastic NBA trade deadlines in a row. And as I've said earlier, I will not be going into a lot of the trades that happened today and the previous couple of days, but there are two that I really want to get into right now. The first of the two major trades that I want to get into is going to be the trade of Kyrie Irving. Now, those of you who are longtime viewers of the channel know that I don't particularly care for Kyrie Irving. There's a lot of reasons for it. And I know that some people already think, well, he's a Celtics fan, so that's why. He just can't stand Kyrie because he left. No, I actually think Kyrie Irving leaving was one of the best decisions, or not necessarily a decision, but one of the best things that happened to the Celtics. Now, if he was on the Celtics right now as just a pure player, we obviously would be probably a lot better, or at least a little bit better than we were, or we are, because, again, he's a fantastic player. But I just think that he's a problem. Morally, I think he's a problem in the locker room. I think he has a problem with his play style as well. I don't think that the way he can be successful by, you know, kind of siphoning the ball and dribbling a lot and everything, I just don't think in today's NBA that is conducive for long-term, consistent team success. You know, and there's guys like a Luka Doncic who is obviously very, very, very good on the ball, right? That, you know, his team is very good. But also, Luka Doncic is one of the best basketball players I have ever seen. He's, you know, insanely good. So, you know, and even he has had a hard time winning in the NBA consistently, especially in the playoffs. So, you know, we'll see kind of what's going on there, especially because that's kind of an omen as to what I'm going to talk about here, for those of you who don't already know what is coming. So Kyrie Irving, again, as I've said, I'm not the biggest fan of his. So this is going to be very interesting and fun for me to talk about, in my opinion. So I'm very excited about it. Kyrie Irving, a couple of days ago, was traded away from the Brooklyn Nets. Now, before I talk about where he went and for whom he went, I want to talk about kind of how this trade came about a little bit. So it was, you know, it was quiet on the Kyrie Irving front, at least in terms of the news, and at least on my end. I hadn't heard really any rumblings about Kyrie Irving for, you know, a month, 2 months, whatever it was. Not really since his last, you know, a hiccup where he posted a video of a pretty anti-Semitic movie, and you know, that whole saga. I hadn't really heard much after that about Kyrie Irving, and, you know, I have to admit, for a minute there, I started to get worried because the Nets started playing a lot better. Kyrie Irving was staying out of trouble. The Nets record kept climbing and climbing, and at one point I think they had something like a 12 or a 15 game winning streak or whatever it was something crazy like that. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh man, you know what? Maybe now is when he's finally learned his lesson. He's going to stay out of trouble. And the Nets, with KD, Kyrie, Nick Claxton, Joe Harris, TJ Warren, all those guys over there, Cam Thomas now, you know, they may do something. I'm getting a little worried about them. They're playing really well. And then, of course, I learned that it was quiet, but that it was too quiet, because it's almost as quickly as the silence came, it disappeared. And Kyrie Irving had very publicly requested a trade away from the Nets. I mean, it came out like, you know, I don't know what time or what specific day it was, but it was the equivalent of like a 6 p.m. on a Thursday. Like, it was just so random, and at such a random time that you know, no one really expected it to happen. It was just so quick and out of nowhere. Maybe it was early in the morning, or it was at like 10:30, like just some random time, and on a random weekday, it just kind of happened. So very, very odd. Obviously, I would go out on a limb and say that there was some kind of, for lack of a better term, come to Jesus meeting, right, between him and Joe Tsai and the ownership over in Brooklyn, and the direction that they talked about, maybe Kyrie didn't necessarily like. Perhaps Kyrie Irving wanted to sign an extension, and Joe Tsai and the Brooklyn Nets were not willing to do so. For obvious reasons, because Kyrie Irving, as great of a basketball player he is, I have always maintained that he is not worth the trouble. He is not worth the money that he is requiring you to pay because of the trouble that he causes, that he stirs up on a regular basis. So, maybe they told him as much. Maybe, hopefully, in a little bit of a less blunt way. But, they just basically, maybe they told him, hey, look, we appreciate everything you've done for us, but we're not going to extend you in the summer. So, you can either stay, ride it out, and try and win a championship with KD, or you can leave, and we'll try and find a trade for you. And he chose option number 2. I obviously don't know what happened necessarily, but I wouldn't be shocked if that is what it is. So, long story short, a couple days later, Kyrie Irving gets traded to the Dallas Mavericks, which I know a lot of people on Twitter and even on some talk shows said that they found it shocking that it was Dallas that made the move. I actually think it's pretty much the ideal fit for Kyrie Irving. I can't really think of a team that is, at the top or near the top of either conference, really, that either could afford him or was a good fit for him. I think, somebody, a team like maybe the Miami Heat could have used him. But again, quite frankly, I don't think that they could have afforded him. I don't think that there was any way that the Brooklyn Nets would have traded Kyrie Irving away for anything less than Tyler Hero and some more, maybe some draft picks or some extra players. I don't think that, Toronto was willing to kind of part ways with Fred VanVleet. I think maybe you could have done that if you were Toronto, but even then, I don't think I would do that, considering how well Fred VanVleet's been playing and how just, how much he's beloved by that fan base. And again, with the trouble that Kyrie Irving tends to cause when he has joined teams in the last few years, right? I don't think that it would be worth it for Toronto to do. I thought about maybe Phoenix, who we'll talk about a little bit later. I thought about maybe Phoenix, but you know what? As much as Chris Paul is getting older and he's not nearly the player that he once was, he is still Chris Paul. And I understand the hesitation of not wanting to part ways with somebody who has such an incredible legacy of success and just brilliant play as Chris Paul. I can understand you wanting to keep him, despite his lack of playoff success, despite the fact that last year in the playoffs, he was one of the main reasons that the Suns choked away that lead in the playoff to the Mavericks. Again, even with all that, I can understand you not wanting to trade Chris Paul, especially if you're not sure if Kyrie Irving's going to be a fit on your team in terms of just morale, and just, maybe even fit on the court. Would he mesh with DeAndre Ayton and Devin Booker on the court? I think he would. I think Devin Booker is a good off-the-ball player, and DeAndre Ayton is obviously not somebody who needs the ball to be successful. So, I think that could have worked, but I pretty much thought that out of every team that was successful that could have used a different point guard other than maybe the Clippers, the Mavericks were the team that made the most sense. Now, I know what you're thinking. Tyler, what about the Lakers? The Lakers and LeBron and Anthony Davis. I said contenders. Hate to break it to you guys. The Lakers are not contenders, at least not yet, because they did make some major moves at the trade deadline, which I will get into next week. But as of right now, I don't even think they are in the play-in tournament if the playoffs started today. So, it's tough for me to say that, they're a contender right now. Now, if you add Kyrie Irving to a team with LeBron James and Anthony Davis on it, it's a pretty solid big three. And obviously, LeBron and Kyrie's legacies together speak for themselves. They won a championship together. So, would that make them a contender? Possibly. But again, I genuinely think that Dallas, out of every team, is the best fit for Kyrie. As good as Spencer Dinwiddie is and has been for Dallas, Kyrie Irving is better. They were able to, not get rid of a ton of depth on that team, although they did get rid of a little bit. But, of course you have to. They didn't get rid of a ton of draft capital. They got rid of a little bit, but, it didn't really, it's not going to really kill them in the future for adding Kyrie Irving. And obviously, I think that if you are able to move some of the other bad contracts on that team, that being Davis Bertans, that being Tim Hardaway Jr., contracts like that are not very good. Maybe a Reggie Bullock, if you could find a trade partner for him. He's making about $10 million despite not really putting up a lot of numbers. So, it's, I think if you can find a way to get rid of some of that, it's not going to be, killing your cap forever to keep Kyrie Irving long term, if that is the plan for Dallas, which I assume it is, as it should be if you trade for somebody that's going to be a free agent. Obviously, the plan is to then keep that player unless you're a rebuilding team, which obviously Dallas is not. I think that it's a great fit for Dallas on the basketball court. Now, obviously, with everything, right? Kyrie Irving, there's always going to be question marks. Is he going to want to play there? Is he going to want to stay there? Is he going to get along with his teammates? How is his, a play style going to affect Luka? Because let's be honest, Kyrie Irving, while he has grown in this area in the past few years, he is not somebody that can be at his full potential without the basketball in his hand. And Luka Doncic is somebody who pretty much has the basketball in his hands all the time, because he averages 30 points and 10 assists a night. I mean, he runs that offense. Quite frankly, he is that offense in Dallas. Now, it's great for him to get help, but will two very ball-dominant guards work out like that? I think it'll be fine. I actually, quite frankly, think it's going to be, it's going to be above average. I think that it makes Dallas a little bit better. So I think it was fine. I've heard a lot of people say that, it didn't make sense. And, why would you do that? Obviously, with all the question marks for Kyrie Irving, I think it's fine. I think that it's a good trade. And I'm just happy that Mark Cuban and the ownership group over in Dallas is getting Luka something. Because let's be honest. I mean, you're spending what? $70 million a year combined on Davis Bertans, Tim Hardaway Jr., Dorian Finney-Smith, Dwight Powell, and Reggie Bullock. I mean, you're talking about 5 players that are probably either average or below average. Maybe on a good day, they're slightly above average. If Finney-Smith is hitting his shot, he's not that bad a player, and he's a good defender. But other than that, I mean, Dwight Powell is, just an average, okay center in the NBA. I wouldn't take him above, really most starting centers in the NBA right now. I certainly wouldn't take him over somebody like a Robert Williams, who's being paid about the same amount of money as Dwight Powell is per year. So, it's not a great contract. He's not providing enough worth for the money he's being paid. Reggie Bullock, doesn't play all that much, and he's making $10 million a year. Dorian Finney-Smith, he was included in the trade, but when he was on the Mavericks, and obviously still is, making this much money, he was making about $12 to $13 million a year. And again, Finney-Smith is a decent player, but again, that's about as much money as Robert Williams or Marcus Smart is making. And those are much better and more valuable players by comparison. So, and then obviously Davis Bertans, I mean, that's one of the worst contracts in the NBA. I mean, you could make an argument for number 1 right behind Duncan Robinson in terms of just awful contracts and just guys that are not doing nearly enough to be worth that much money. And he's making around $18 million a year. So you're talking about, somewhere in the realm of $70 million for 5 players. And again, there's also Tim Hardaway Jr., which I left out there, and I don't exactly know how much money he's making. Somewhere, I think, $14 million or something like that. But either way, you're talking for 5 players around $70 to $75 million of cap space. you are wasting for not that much worth. Now, obviously, with Finney-Smith gone, I assume that Tim Hardaway Jr. will play a lot more. So we'll see if he kind of, gives more value the more he plays, which I assume he will. But nonetheless, it's just nice to see Dallas doing something to get Luka some help. Because quite frankly, he didn't have a whole lot of help. Now, I'll say this. Spencer Dinwiddie, I am a big fan. I really like Spencer Dinwiddie. I think he's underrated, and he's been underrated for years. And you know what? The last time I think he was really getting the shine he deserved was when he played for, you guessed it, Brooklyn. When he was averaging about 20 points a night in Brooklyn when they were in their big rebuilding phase back in the early 2010s. So I think for Spencer Dinwiddie, it's good for him. He gets to kind of have a homecoming there in Brooklyn, where I know he's well-loved and well-liked there. And you know what? He's averaging about 18 points a night right now for Dallas this year. And so I think that he'll do great in Brooklyn. I think that he's a very nice pickup for them. And obviously Finney-Smith gives them some wing depth that they're desperately going to need now. And so, yeah, I think it was a pretty good trade all around. I think, the thing that's going to really, we're going to see who wins the trade is obviously Brooklyn got what they wanted out of the deal for their rebuild. And I think that it's going to really depend on how Kyrie Irving as a person meshes with the city of Dallas. If he comes in there and he keeps his mouth shut, which he's already not doing, and he, is humble about things, and he understands he's not the alpha on that team because Luka is that dude, and he doesn't try to be the alpha on that team, and he doesn't try to take over that team and make it his way, and most importantly for Dallas, if he decides to sign long-term in Dallas, which obviously is the plan, otherwise Dallas wouldn't have tried to trade for him at all, if he leaves after this season, then you basically just threw away draft picks and, all this stuff, especially if you don't win a championship. So, I guess if you win a championship and then he decides to leave, well, it's not ideal, but at least you got a championship out of it. So definitely, if they don't win a championship, he has to stay, or else this is not going to be remotely worth it for Dallas. And you know what? For me, I don't want Kyrie Irving on my team anyway, so, it might not even be worth it if he does stick around. So, we'll see on that end. But that is, I think it was a pretty good trade all around for both teams, and we'll see how it plays out. Dallas won their first game with Kyrie without Luka, interestingly enough, the other night, I believe against the Clippers. So, we'll see kind of how this meshes between Luka and Kyrie and obviously the rest of that squad over there in Dallas. But I think it was a decent trade for everyone involved. Let's just hope Kyrie Irving doesn't try and blow this team up like he's blown up the last couple teams he's been on.
Hey guys, me again. Thank you so much for watching one of my clips from the Lopes Goes Last podcast. These clips are so much fun to do. I absolutely love making them, and I absolutely love doing them. And this podcast is my baby. So I really want this thing to grow, and I really want it to succeed. So if you did like what you see, please subscribe. Also hit that bell notification so you never miss any one of my episodes or one of my clips like this one. And please do also like and share these videos with your friends and your family so that we can make this thing grow as fast as possible. And I wanted to thank you again so much. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video and have a great rest of your day.